It was the kind of fall afternoon that made Bay Village feel like the safest place in Ohio. On October 27, 1989, just after school let out, 10-year-old Amy Mihaljevic walked out the doors of her elementary school and disappeared into daylight. She was supposed to meet someone, a man she'd spoken to on the phone, who claimed he wanted help picking out a gift for her mother. It was a small lie with devastating consequences. Amy never came home. Within hours, her family realized something was wrong. Within days, the entire region was searching for her. What followed would become one of the most haunting child abduction cases in American history. A carefully planned kidnapping, committed in public, across the street from the local police station, and still, decades later, unsolved. Over 36 years have passed, but Amy's case continues to echo. Someone made that phone call, someone led her away, and someone still knows the truth. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we unravel the timeline, examine the suspects, and ask the question, what most likely happened to Amy Mihaljevic? Amy Mihaljevic was a fifth grader at Bay Village Middle School, known for her love of horses, her kindness, and a turquoise earring she proudly wore the day she vanished. In the weeks before her disappearance, someone had been calling her at home while her mother was at work. The man on the other end of the line claimed to be a co-worker of her mom's, and he told Amy he needed her help. He said he wanted to buy a present for her mother to celebrate a promotion, a gesture Amy found sweet and believable. She agreed to meet him. On Friday, October 27, 1989, school ended as usual. Amy told friends she had something to do after class. Surveillance cameras didn't exist at her school or at the nearby shopping plaza, but several witnesses later recalled seeing her at Bay Square, standing near the parking lot outside a bakery. She was talking to a man, white, somewhere in his 30s, casually dressed. He put his hand on her shoulder at one point, and they walked off together. No one intervened. It didn't look like an emergency. At home, Amy's older brother grew uneasy when she didn't return. He called their mother, Margaret Mihaljevic, at work. Margaret wasn't immediately concerned. Amy had mentioned possibly attending a choir tryout, but something didn't sit right. Then, just before 4 p.m., Margaret received a phone call. It was Amy. She sounded calm, said the tryout had gone fine, and ended the call quickly. That moment gave her mother brief reassurance, a comfort that would turn out to be false. Investigators would later conclude the abductor had prompted Amy to make the call, buying himself more time to leave the area unnoticed. By the time Margaret arrived home that evening and realized Amy was missing, panic had replaced uncertainty. Local police were contacted, and within hours, the FBI joined the case. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, retraced Amy's steps, and began what would become one of the largest missing child investigations in state history. Volunteers handed out flyers. Tip lines flooded. Media coverage turned the quiet suburb into the focus of national attention. Still, the days stretched on without answers. Fall turned to winter, and hope began to erode. Over 100 days after Amy was last seen, a jogger in Ashland County made a gruesome discovery. On February 8, 1990, while running along a remote stretch of farmland off County Road 1181, the jogger spotted a small body partially hidden in the brush just off the roadside. Authorities were called. It was Amy. She had died violently. Blunt force trauma to the head and multiple stab wounds. Her body had been left in the open, likely placed there shortly after her death. She was still wearing the outfit from that October afternoon, but certain items were missing. Her boots, her denim school bag, her binder, and her earrings. None of those objects have ever been recovered. Roughly 300 yards from where her body was found, investigators came across two pieces of fabric: a green curtain and a yellowish blanket, both stained with blood. The pattern and texture suggested they may have been used to carry or conceal the body. Appeals were made to the public for help identifying the materials, but the textiles have never been definitively traced to a source. The site where Amy was discovered was more than an hour's drive from Bay Village. It was rural, isolated, and not on the way to anywhere. Whoever left her there had either grown up nearby or knew the area well enough to navigate it unnoticed. Despite thousands of leads and years of effort, no arrest was made. The Mihaljevic family grieved without resolution, their daughter's face now etched into the memory of a generation. The case was never closed, and over time, new witnesses, technologies, and theories would enter the picture. But on that October day in 1989, a man made a phone call. A little girl believed him, and what happened next would haunt Bay Village forever. From the beginning, investigators understood that Amy Mihaljevic's abduction did not resemble a spontaneous crime. The phone calls, the chosen meeting place, and the absence of a struggle suggested planning. Over the years, that realization produced a wide range of theories, some compelling, others dramatic, and many ultimately unsupported. Each offered a possible explanation, but none delivered definitive proof. Dean Runkle, the eccentric educator. One of the most scrutinized names in the case is Dean Runkle, a former middle school science teacher in the area. Runkle not only resembled the man described by witnesses at the abduction site, but also lived near where Amy's body was later found. He was known to be overly familiar with certain students, and years earlier had been quietly removed from a school position after concerning behavior. He left Ohio shortly after Amy's murder and reappeared years later under the radar in Florida. One of Amy's classmates even picked Runkle's photo out of a lineup, but despite the circumstantial weight, no forensic link was ever made. Runkle denied involvement and was never charged. Richard Hulbert, the church confessor. In an unusual twist, a man named Richard Hulbert stood up during a church service years after the crime and claimed he had killed Amy. The shock of his public confession didn't last long. Investigators confirmed he had been hospitalized in a psychiatric facility at the time of the abduction, making his story impossible. Hulbert's case is one of several false confessions the FBI received. Reminders that high-profile cases often attract unstable individuals looking for attention or redemption. Joseph Chandler, Robert Nichols, the man with no name. After the 2002 death of a man known as Joseph Newton Chandler III, it was discovered he had stolen that identity from a long-deceased child decades earlier. His real name was Robert Ivan Nichols, and he had lived for years in northeast Ohio, near the area and time of Amy's abduction. The mystery surrounding why he went to such lengths to hide his past raised suspicions. Could he have been involved in other crimes? Online theorists and law enforcement explored the possibility, but no direct ties were ever made between Nichols and the Mihaljevic case. The caller who tried again. In 2006, investigators revealed that 3 other girls had received eerily similar phone calls in the weeks before Amy's disappearance. Same story, same method. All had recently visited the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center. Unlike Amy, they declined the meeting. This raised the possibility that the offender had a wider plan and was operating locally. One theory held that the killer had access to the Nature Center guest book, and perhaps ties to the center itself. Interestingly, Dean Runkle had once volunteered there and supplied animals for exhibits, drawing him back into suspicion. But again, no physical proof emerged. These and other theories create a mosaic of possibilities. Some focused on a single suspect, others on a method. All shared one frustration. None have yet crossed the threshold from suspicion to certainty. But behind closed doors, investigators have quietly narrowed their focus. And what remains is not the most dramatic theory, it's the one that fits. When investigators strip away the noise, the false confessions, the internet speculation, the dead ends, one explanation consistently aligns with the known facts. Amy Mihaljevic was targeted by a local man who had routine access to children, familiarity with rural Ashland County, and the ability to move through her world without raising suspicion. Among the known suspects, Dean Runkle fits that profile more closely than anyone else whose name has been made public. Runkle was a middle school science teacher, someone children were expected to trust. He lived in New London, just miles from the field where Amy's body was later discovered. An area investigators believe the killer knew well. The dump site was not visible from the road and was not a place someone would stumble upon accidentally. It was the kind of location a local would choose instinctively, without hesitation. The method used to reach Amy suggests preparation rather than impulse. The phone calls were specific, rehearsed and timed for when she would be home alone. Whoever made them knew her mother's workplace and promotion status and understood how to sound legitimate to a child. That level of confidence points to someone accustomed to speaking with children in an authoritative but reassuring way. As a teacher, Runkle did exactly that for a living. There is also the matter of access. Investigators later revealed that multiple girls received nearly identical calls, all sharing a recent visit to the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center, a place that kept a public logbook with children's contact information. Runkle had volunteered at the center in the past and supplied animals there. While this does not prove he took information from the book, it places him within a narrow circle of adults who could have. On the day Amy disappeared, witnesses described a man whose appearance and demeanor closely resembled Runkle. Years later, one of those witnesses selected his photograph from a lineup as looking like the man she saw with Amy. Again, this is not definitive. Memory fades and eyewitness accounts are imperfect, but it is one of several elements that point in the same direction. After the murder, Runkle's behavior raised further questions. He left Ohio not long after Amy was killed, abandoning his teaching career and drifting for years before resurfacing in Florida. When investigators later began requesting DNA samples from persons of interest, Runkle hired a criminal defense attorney. To some, that move suggested fear rather than cooperation, though it could also be explained as self-protection. Importantly, no physical evidence has ever tied him directly to the crime. Still, when viewed as a whole, the scenario is coherent. A local educator, familiar with children and trusted by default, gains access to personal information, initiates contact by phone, and arranges a meeting in a public place where nothing looks overtly wrong. Amy goes willingly. There is no struggle. From there, she is driven out of Bay Village to a rural area the offender knows well. What happens next is violent and brief. Her body is left in a location chosen not for concealment, but for familiarity. The missing items, the boots, the earrings, the binder, suggest souvenirs, something offenders of this type are known to keep. The curtain and blanket point to a hastily improvised method of transport, likely from a private residence or vehicle. None of this requires an elaborate conspiracy or an outsider passing through. It requires only opportunity, confidence, and silence. It is critical to say this clearly. Dean Runkle has never been charged, and law enforcement has not named him as the killer. Circumstantial alignment is not proof. Amy Mihaljevic's case has endured because it sits at the intersection of what is known and what cannot yet be proven. The most likely explanation is not the most dramatic one. It is the quietest, that her killer was someone already inside her world, someone who understood it well enough to exploit it, and someone who has managed for decades to say nothing. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there.